This house has been sold to our eldest son and his wife.
Anyone else living here should leave immediately.
I couldn't believe the words that came out of my in-laws' mouths and from my husband, Alex. From the start, the three of them had only stayed with me to make me pay off the mortgage. The moment I realized that fact, my feelings turned from gratitude to hatred in an instant. "All right, I'll move out then," I responded with a cold smile as they sneered at me. They'd picked a fight with me, and I would make sure they regretted it for the rest of their lives. I immediately reached out to someone I trusted and began devising a plan to take my revenge on the three of them. My name is Nora Anderson. I am a 48-year-old attorney working at a law firm. Currently, I have been supporting my in-laws and my husband financially. It all started when I gave my in-laws a house as a gift. Alex and I got married when I was 30 years old. Right around the time our wedding was decided, Alex's father was involved in an unexpected accident. He injured his leg, making it difficult for him to walk without assistance, and he had to start using a wheelchair. Since Alex's mother wasn't young enough to care for him on her own, I became worried about their well-being and decided to gift them a barrier-free house. Initially, they said they would live in an apartment, but I suggested a place halfway between Alex's workplace and mine so that we could quickly reach them if anything happened. My father and I owe so much to the Anderson family, and I want to repay that kindness. My father had passed away before I got married. In the final years of his life, he had accumulated a large amount of debt, and our family finances were in dire straits. We had been forced into a vicious cycle of borrowing money to pay off previous loans, living what felt like a nightmare. It was Alex and his family who saved us from that situation. Alex and his parents had covered my father's debts for us.
If the debt is the only thing stopping you from moving forward, we'll handle it, no problem. My parents feel the same way.
Exactly. Your father's debt came from a company bankruptcy, right? Not from reckless spending. Of course, we'll help.
That's right. When someone's in trouble, you step in to help. You shouldn't feel guilty about that.
Without any hesitation, Alex and his parents provided financial support to cover most of the debt. Both my father and I cried as we expressed our gratitude, and I threw myself into studying for the legal clerk exam. The total amount of money they lent us was just under $50,000. With the income I'd make as an attorney, I knew I could pay them back in full during my lifetime. The idea of leaving such a huge favor unpaid was unacceptable to me. I swore to pass the exam and become a lawyer. And once I became a lawyer, I would repay every penny I owed to Alex's parents. Fueled by that determination, I worked tirelessly. Thanks to my effort, I passed the legal clerk exam on my first try. I received congratulations not only from my father, but also from my in-laws. I quickly found a job and began working at a law firm. The director was a kind person, and there were skilled attorneys at the office who guided me. I rapidly improved under their mentorship. Before long, I met clients who signed exclusive contracts with me, and now, as a female attorney earning over $100,000 a year, I've become a prominent figure at the firm. By the time my career had stabilized, my father and I managed to finish paying off all the debt to my in-laws. With nothing tying him to this world anymore, my father followed my late mother and passed away. After my father and mother passed away, leaving me alone, Alex proposed to me.
You're a strong woman who could live on your own. But I want to be the man who stands by you. I promise to always cherish you. Will you marry me?
With that, our marriage was decided, and I thought we were heading toward a bright future together. Then, tragedy struck. Alex's father, Sam, had an accident. Because of the immense kindness they had shown me before, I insisted on helping despite their protests and offered to build them a brand new, wheelchair-accessible home. My gratitude to you is so immense that even this doesn't feel like enough. So please, don't hold back. I want you both to live a life free from inconvenience. I meant it from the bottom of my heart. It wasn't just polite words. It was my true, heartfelt emotion. Moved by my sincerity, my in-laws, Susan and Sam, finally agreed, though they smiled awkwardly as they gave in. However, right after they agreed, they added something unexpected.
Nora, why don't you live with us? Weren't you and Alex planning to find a home to live in together?
That's right. If you don't mind, let's live together. After all, once we're gone, the house will belong to you and Alex anyway.
Alex had an older brother, Mike. He was 3 years older and had gotten married and moved out long ago. Since he was busy running his own business, he entrusted everything related to their parents to Alex. In exchange for taking responsibility for their care, Alex was given full control over his parents' assets. Before getting married and moving out, Mike had verbally conveyed that agreement to Alex. If I moved into the new home that was set to become Alex's family home, as his parents suggested, my commute would become shorter. Living together would mean I could help whenever something happened, and I really had no reason to refuse. However, if they lived with me, a stranger, my in-laws would probably be exhausted. I had already caused them enough trouble before our marriage. Was it okay for me to live with them? As I hesitated, filled with such worries, Alex seemed to sense my anxiety. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder and smiled reassuringly.
I'll be here to support you, Nora. It'll be okay. Trust me.
Hearing those words from Alex, I agreed to live with his parents. I thought the four of us would live a happy life together as one family. But that idyllic dream never became a reality.
Nora, where did you put my suit for the funeral?
Nora, the TV remote isn't working.
Nora, could you give me a hand? I want to sit on the couch.
For 13 years after we began living together, everyone in the house dumped their tasks on me. None of them ever tried to handle things themselves. They constantly asked me where everything was, and Sam, taking advantage of his limited mobility, began touching me whenever he pleased. I told you I already set out your funeral suit and hung it up, didn't I? And Susan, that's the AC remote, and the TV remote is on the table. Sam, please ask Alex to help with physical support when he's home, not me. I can't support your weight on my own. In the beginning, I endured it all without complaint and handled every task they threw my way. But managing the mortgage and running the entire household, it was too much. I'm getting a divorce. I had thought that way many times. But every time I was on the brink of leaving, Alex would smooth things over, and his parents would cry and beg me to stay. They weren't abusive or deliberately cruel, so every time they apologized, my resolve to leave would waver, and I stayed. Susan had also started asking these kinds of questions frequently, though I couldn't tell if it was mild cognitive decline or just simple forgetfulness. Alex, who had once promised to support me no matter what, became completely unreliable. Can I really keep living like this? That anxiety lingered in my heart as the days passed. But as time went on, I began to adapt. Before I knew it, I had adjusted to the routine, completed tasks before anyone asked, and even voiced my opinions clearly to Alex and his parents. However, I couldn't turn a blind eye to Sam's inappropriate behavior, and I found myself complaining not only to Alex, but even to Susan. I can't ignore what Sam does anymore. Lately, he's been pretending to be confused just to touch me. Please say something to him. Sam had not been officially diagnosed with dementia. To be precise, he had undergone an evaluation, but he was never diagnosed with dementia. The doctor said his condition was so mild that it was difficult to determine whether it was truly cognitive impairment or not.
Please don't be so harsh on him. His behavior is because of his condition. He can't help it.
It's true that cognitive decline can cause such behaviors in more advanced stages. But Sam wasn't at that point. He was using the idea of dementia as an excuse to do whatever he wanted. Even after I explained to them that the doctor hadn't diagnosed him with dementia, Alex's parents insisted that he had it and brushed off any inappropriate actions as part of his illness. If he really had dementia, I wouldn't have said anything like this. But using illness as a shield to force others to endure his behavior, that's unforgivable. I even asked Alex to step in and handle the situation with his parents. But each time he'd sigh, say it was too much trouble, and promise to deal with it later, which never happened. I was nearing my breaking point, and that's when something completely unexpected happened. The mortgage will be paid off this month. We're finally free from this nightmare. One afternoon, I was tidying up my budget and journal during my day off, and I noticed something as I glanced at the bank book. By the end of this month, we would finally be done paying off the mortgage on Alex's family home. I felt a sense of accomplishment flood over me, as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The thought of having more financial freedom, with less burden on my back, filled me with so much joy I could hardly contain it. But that moment marked the beginning of true hell.
Nora, is the mortgage really getting paid off this month?
During dinner that evening, Alex suddenly brought up the mortgage, something he had never mentioned before. I wondered why he was asking out of the blue, and as I watched him pour beer into my glass with an unusually charming smile, I felt suspicious. Yes, it's true. But why are you asking all of a sudden?
Well, we should celebrate, right? You've been carrying such a heavy burden all this time. Let's throw a big party to celebrate and thank you.
His unexpected words left me speechless. I never thought Alex had been aware of how much I had shouldered. If that's the case, then help out around the house a bit more. I couldn't help but think that to myself, but I figured that, in his own way, he had been trying to be considerate. All of my frustrations vanished in an instant, and I couldn't help but smile from ear to ear with happiness. Alex, thank you. Is it okay if I look forward to the celebration?
Of course, I'll talk to Mom and Dad and get everything ready. Just relax and wait for it, Nora.
I didn't suspect a thing and accepted his invitation. Apparently, the news reached his parents right away, and the three of them started making preparations without me. A few weeks later, Alex and his parents called me over. Work had settled down at the time, and I had some free time, so it felt like the perfect timing for a celebration.
Sorry to call you over out of the blue, but we have something to discuss with you.
It's no problem at all.
Today we have something important to tell you from our whole family.
Something important. I wondered if they were talking about the celebration, but would they really make it sound so ominous if that were the case? Normally, they just say it outright without being so mysterious. Feeling a bit uneasy, I sat down and listened to them.
Actually, now that the mortgage is paid off, we want you to leave this house.
What? The unexpected words made me blurt out a bewildered response. Leave the house because the mortgage is paid off. What were they saying? Did I mishear them? It would not be surprising if I were confused. I was stunned, unable to comprehend Alex's words or respond. Seeing my confusion, his parents quickly followed up.
We've sold this house to our eldest son and his wife.
What? It made no sense at all. First, they told me to leave, and now they said they sold the house to Mike and his wife. In short, they were saying I was no longer needed, but there's no way I could accept something so absurd and unfair. What had I done to deserve this?
We've received such a wonderful house from you. We have no use for you anymore. We only stayed with you until the mortgage was paid off, but now that the house is ours, you're completely unnecessary.
I had felt immense gratitude toward Alex's family. I was so grateful that I wanted to give them the gift of a home, which is why I stayed with them without complaint all this time. But now I realized it had all been an act. Everything they did for me and my father was just to make me do something in return. They had known I was striving to become a lawyer to pay off my father's debts, and they saw it as an investment, hoping to get it all back and more. It had all been a gamble to get me to buy them a house. Their actions had all been part of an elaborate setup.
We were right to do you a favor, and you gave us something big in return, just like we expected. Since dating, Alex has always been good at getting something back for what he invested. We never thought our efforts would go to waste.
Remember when she brought over expensive wine as thanks for just visiting your dad? We thought, wow, what a fool. She's so easy to manipulate.
This was even before my father's company went bankrupt. Our family had been fairly well off until the bankruptcy. Alex had targeted me from the start for my family's wealth, knowing I was working toward becoming a legal professional. That's why he thought I was worth the effort. Completely unaware, I trusted Alex and his family fully. How stupid I was. I felt sick with self-loathing.
That's why we came up with this plan. We figured if we helped your father, we'd get something huge in return.
And it worked like a charm. We got ourselves a brand new house out of it. And since you registered it in our name, once the mortgage was paid off, it became ours. We can do whatever we want with it now. It's none of your business anymore.
I couldn't possibly accept the smug words of these three, who spoke so heartlessly, as if they weren't even human. From the very beginning, everything had been orchestrated. For 13 years, they had quietly waited for this moment. They never loved me, and they saw my father as nothing more than a money tree. They were never genuinely sincere with us. They had planned everything from the start to entrap my family. The reality was so devastating that I felt like the world was collapsing around me. I felt as though I was sinking into a pit of despair. It was despair. At that moment, there was no better word to describe my state. I couldn't comprehend the things they had done, the things they were saying, or the things they believed.
So, that's how it is. You're not part of this family anymore. Get out.
You got a lot of stuff to pack, right? You can't do it all tonight, so let's give you until tomorrow. Be grateful for that at least. Get your things together and be gone by then.
This house belongs to the Andersons now.
Oh, and I want a divorce. There's no point in staying married to you anymore, and I'm done listening to your nagging. When you leave tomorrow, make sure you sign the papers.
The Anderson family, those words weighed heavily on me. From the beginning, they never treated me like a member of their family. That's why they acted so unfairly, made me work like a slave, and had me juggle both my job and the household like a workhorse. Once all the pieces came together, a dry, bitter smile escaped my lips. So, I was being deceived by your family from the very start.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying. Are you really that slow? Can't you even understand that?
Alex's final remark made something inside me snap. I lifted my head, forced a wide smile onto my face, and gave a surprising response to Alex and his parents. All right, I'll move out then. When I suddenly flashed a bright smile and casually agreed to leave the house, both Alex and his parents looked stunned.
Wow, you're being really cooperative. What's your angle?
Angle? I'm not clever enough for that. After hearing such absurd nonsense, I feel like I've hit rock bottom. And that's exactly why my love for your family has completely disappeared. I'll have everything packed and be out by today. And yes, I'll sign the divorce papers. I'll also have someone from my office contact you about the asset division. Thanks for everything up to now. Without waiting for a response from Alex or his parents, I ran to my room. Fighting back tears, I packed my belongings while thinking about what I needed to do next. There's no way I'm letting them get away with treating me like trash. If I don't make them experience the same pain they caused me, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. As I packed, I vowed to get revenge. What could I do to make them really feel the consequences of their actions? I was deep in thought when my phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, an idea sparked in my mind. If it's this person, they might be able to help me. Without hesitation, I answered the call and poured out everything that had happened. We discussed a plan and decided to act immediately. Once I finished packing, I left the house without saying goodbye to Alex or his parents. I deleted all their contact information. No matter what they said, I made sure there was no way for me to respond, and the results were immediate. My phone was flooded with missed calls from Sammy and Susan. Even though I had deleted their numbers, the familiar digits were etched into my memory. Seeing their calls pop up made me feel sick. They must have realized what was happening. But I had no intention of answering. I smiled down at my phone.
You don't have to answer it.
The person who took me in at my new place spoke to me gently. I nodded once in response. Moments later, Alex's number appeared on the screen. The incessant ringing was unbearable, so I turned off my phone, and I never turned it back on again, and eventually canceled the line altogether. A few months later, I found a new apartment and started my life there. Without the stress of living with my in-laws, I thrived at work and lived every day to the fullest. With the burdensome environment that had weighed me down gone, I was finally living my life to the fullest, and it seems I appeared radiant to those around me. After my divorce, I received compliments. People said I looked healthier, more beautiful, and brighter. With the weight of my in-laws gone, I finally had the energy to build stronger relationships at work. From now on, I'll put more effort into my job. I'll connect with people more. I'll treasure my interactions with others. It was at that moment that I felt determined. The receptionist rushed into the office, her face pale.
Nora, there's a mother and son at the front desk yelling for you to come out.
The receptionist was normally calm and professional, so seeing her so shaken was startling. A concerned male colleague offered to accompany me to the lobby, and when I saw who was standing there, my expression hardened.
There she is. Mom, I found Nora.
Nora, what's the meaning of this? Cutting off all contact like that? Do you know what we've been through since then?
The people who had shown up were Alex and Susan, and they were shouting at the top of their lungs in the office. I couldn't believe how shamelessly they behaved without any sense of decency, and their disgraceful display made everyone around them stare in stunned disbelief. In just a few months, both of them looked gaunt, their faces hollow, and their eyes bloodshot as they glared at me. One of the other receptionists, sensing the severity of the situation, went to call someone in charge, and soon the CEO, having heard the commotion, appeared in the lobby.
Nora, I've prepared a meeting room. Why don't you speak with them there? I'll make a call on your behalf afterward.
Since I had already explained everything to the CEO in advance, I nodded in agreement with his suggestion. I didn't feel comfortable facing them alone, so I had my colleague accompany me. That colleague was the attorney I had hired for the case against Alex, so Alex and Susan had no choice but to accept his presence. We all headed toward the meeting room. Even on the way there, Alex and Susan glared at me with resentment. They couldn't stand that, despite their attempts to corner me, I was calmly enjoying my work and living my life. Their bitter gazes made their feelings all too clear. As we sat facing each other in the meeting room, still locked in a silent standoff, the CEO entered, bringing someone else with him.
Sorry for the delay.
What? No way.
Why is my brother here?
The person the CEO brought in, it was Alex's older brother, Mike. Mike stood tall, radiating fury as he glared at the two of them.
There's nothing complicated about it. You two went way out of line.
Mike had a rough past and was once the leader of a local biker gang in his youth. Now, however, he ran his own construction company and was respected by his employees, who affectionately called him the boss. He had a strong sense of justice and couldn't stand underhanded behavior. When I needed help after losing my home, I reached out to Mike, and he was furious when he learned what had happened. With no place to live, he let me live in an apartment owned by his company. He also investigated the house I had given to Alex's parents. Mike, who knew nothing until then, agreed to help as soon as he heard the full story. Why was it that Mike knew nothing about the situation? When Alex's parents told me to leave the house, they declared that they had sold it to the eldest son and his wife. The reason Mike didn't know about it was because
Yeah, I made Isabella spill everything, and I've got the facts. You really thought you'd get away with doing this to Nora? Think again.
At the mention of Isabella's name, Alex and Susan's faces turned pale. Isabella was Mike's wife and the mastermind behind everything. Isabella, the eldest son's wife, had always disliked me for some reason. She was a homemaker who had always followed Mike's lead. And it wasn't because Mike had ordered her to do so. A woman's role is to manage the home. Her parents had instilled that belief in her, and since they lived that way themselves, it was only natural for her to believe that women were supposed to handle all the household chores. To her, a woman who couldn't handle household duties wasn't a real woman. But how must I have looked to her when I appeared in her life? Having her nearly 40-year-long belief shattered, she must have found my passionate dedication to my work blinding. On top of that, Isabella was notoriously bad at cooking. Mike, and even Sam, had asked Susan to teach her how to cook. That's how bad it was. I'd heard that from Alex himself. Meanwhile, I could manage household chores just fine, even while balancing a career. I imagine she couldn't stand the fact that I excelled at everything she struggled with. She was probably overwhelmed with envy, unable to stand the fact that I could do everything she couldn't. She began throwing snide remarks my way whenever we crossed paths. She'd say things like, "You only care about work and neglect your home," or "You make your husband handle household chores. You're such an unworthy wife." Over the years, I'd heard those kinds of remarks countless times. Each time, Mike stepped in and shut her down. That probably only fueled her resentment toward me even more. Mike had told Isabella that if she wanted to work, she was free to do so, and he even helped out around the house. The fact that she chose not to change her situation was her decision. Taking it out on me was completely unreasonable. Whenever Mike reprimanded her, she lashed out at me instead.
When I pressed Isabella, she admitted that her plan was to take over the house and trick Nora. She manipulated Mom and Dad into playing along. Mom and Dad thought they'd get a house in their name and could pretend to be senile to avoid any blame from Nora.
They had all done whatever they wanted, knowing I couldn't contact Mike because of Isabella's interference. Alex had even received compensation for his role in the scheme, and every one of them was an accomplice. Mike was the only one left in the dark. If Mike had known, he would have stopped their nonsense before it began. I could tell he felt deeply apologetic about the entire ordeal. So that's why everyone acted so meek whenever Mike visited. Whenever Mike came over, Alex's parents never pulled any stunts. They knew what would happen if Mike found out about their behavior. The CEO and my colleagues, who had been listening, looked at Alex and Susan with visible disgust.
Well then, what should we do with you? You've disgraced our family and caused so much trouble for Nora. I'm not planning to let a single thing slide.
But this wasn't our idea. It was Isabella who started it all.
Exactly. We just got sweet-talked into it, and we didn't mean any harm.
No harm, you say? Alex's words made me snap. I suddenly stood up, my face twisted with fury, and yelled at Alex and Susan. After everything you did, do you really think no harm intended excuses it? Do you have any idea what I went through for 13 years while living by your side? The moment I finally let out all the emotions I had been holding in, tears of anger and frustration streamed down my face. Neither Alex nor Susan had ever seen me cry before. No matter how much hardship I endured, I never showed weakness and always held on. Even when Sam used his supposed dementia as an excuse to do whatever he wanted, I never shed a tear and silently endured it all. To them, I had always been a strong woman who never cried. The person they had always thought of as calm was now raising her voice and shedding large, bitter tears. It was no wonder they were stunned, questioning the reality of the scene unfolding before their eyes. Do you even realize how much I was grateful to you all and wanted to repay your kindness? And to think that the way you treated my father was because of such a selfish reason. I'll never forgive you. I'll never forgive any of you. At that moment, Mike signaled someone to enter the meeting room. A man in a black suit walked in and sat down on the sofa on our side, staring intently at Alex and Susan. You will be held fully accountable for what you've done.
What?
Susan let out a bewildered yelp, unable to grasp what was happening. This man is the attorney Mike hired for me. He's not only known as one of the top lawyers in my firm, but is also like a mentor to me. I intend to file for compensation for all the suffering and injustices I've endured.
What?
You can't be serious. How long has it been since everything happened?
The amount of time doesn't matter.
The attorney, who had been silently listening to their protests, adjusted his glasses and addressed them with an icy glare.
With physical evidence and the reasons for the claim clearly established, it is entirely possible to file for damages. In this case, I've been informed that there was no agreement stating that Nora wouldn't seek compensation during the divorce. In such cases, there's no fixed deadline for filing. Therefore, the claim for damages is completely valid. And furthermore,
The attorney reached into his pocket and pulled out a small SSD drive. Alex and Susan stared at it with confusion.
What's that?
this contains records Nora has collected over time. Her work laptop, which she often used in the living room, has a built-in camera that captured your family's abusive behavior.
The moment they realized what it was, their faces turned pale.
It seems Nora did most of her work in the living room. Many modern laptops have built-in cameras. Your decision to harass her in that room without knowing about the camera has come back to bite you.
The attorney calmly placed SSD back into his pocket and stared at them coldly.
The house ownership has already been transferred back to Nora. It's only a matter of time before you are legally evicted. We will begin the formal procedures shortly. You'd better prepare the necessary funds.
Wait a minute. You transferred the ownership?
Alex panicked and shouted at the attorney's calm declaration. This time, Mike stepped forward with a smirk.
I'm the one who helped Nora get the ownership back. Thanks to you trying to switch it to Isabella's name without permission, it was surprisingly easy to transfer it back. You have any complaints about that?
Mike leaned in closer, his intimidating grin making Alex shrink back. Since Alex had never won a fight against Mike, even as a child, he couldn't bring himself to voice his opinion. Susan, listening in silence, also kept her mouth shut.
We'll also be billing you for the legal expenses related to this transfer. That's only fair, isn't it? You caused this mess, so you're responsible for cleaning it up.
Mike stood tall, arms crossed, as he delivered his harsh words. Alex and Susan were completely speechless. Mike had also informed Isabella of everything and told me that he planned to divorce her once the matter was settled.
Even though I didn't know what was happening, I'm truly sorry for what my family put you through. I'll support you however you need. Just say the word. I bear responsibility for what they've done.
If Mike hadn't reached out to me that day while I was packing, I don't know where I would be now. I might still have been suffering alone. If Mike had been on their side, or if I'd had no one to turn to, I wouldn't have been able to recover like this. Having even one person who stands by you can make a world of difference. Grateful for Mike's kindness and support, I glared at Alex and Susan and delivered my final blow. I will never forgive you for using my father and me to enrich yourselves. No matter how much you atone, I will never forget or forgive you. If you ever show up here again, I'll report you to the police without hesitation. From now on, handle everything through my attorney. Don't ever show your face in front of me again. The CEO and my colleagues had stayed to witness everything, leaving Alex and Susan no room to make excuses. Defeated, they nodded meekly and left the office. Shortly after, Alex and his parents moved out of the house. Mike negotiated compensation for me, taking into account the money I was forced to spend on the house, the sham marriage, and the emotional and physical suffering I endured. The settlement was $70,000.
I really wanted to squeeze more out of them, but this was the most realistic figure after consulting with the attorney.
As Mike lamented in frustration, I shook my head firmly, signaling that he had nothing to feel ashamed of. In most cases of emotional abuse, the maximum compensation is around $30,000. Given the severity of the additional offenses, securing a higher amount was a victory. I was nothing but grateful. The house was returned to me within a few days. Even the furniture and appliances were retrieved intact under Mike's supervision during their move-out process. That house is now being rented out. It's still too spacious for me to live in alone, and the location and accessibility features make it a highly convenient home. Mike advised me that it would be a waste to leave it unused, which gave me the idea to rent it out. As for Isabella, just as Mike had declared, she was living a restricted life until her debts were repaid. She worked tirelessly morning, noon, and night, as did Alex and Susan. Only Sam was exempt from working due to his disability, but his pension was deducted to repay the debt. It seems they're all living in a kind of hell on earth. Hearing the story, I felt a deep sense of relief, grateful that Mike had been someone I could rely on. Years have passed since then. I'm still working hard as an attorney. Thanks to Mike, the compensation payments have been coming in regularly, and they are expected to be fully paid off in 2 years. There were times during that nightmare when I wanted to give up on my life, but the phrase "hard work always pays off" turned out to be true. With that in mind, I live each day with gratitude.